Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the number one home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
All right, welcome back to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we're going to cover the Ducks here. Unfortunately, we thought they would beat Nashville in Game 6 or Game 7. They ended up not doing it. We're going to cover those games. We're going to also talk about, obviously, the news of Bruce Boudreau being fired. Tons of fan questions and concerns about that move and what the Ducks do from here. So we got a lot to get to in this show, Eddie, but we got to go back to Game 6 and 7. Unfortunately, the Ducks could not get it done. They, lost Game 6 3-1, and then they lost Game 7 2-1, Eddie, and history repeated itself, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I mean, I think more so this time, I think we're all a little bit surprised, and it's hard to say that, but because it's happened 4 times in a row, we're all used to it now. But I really think we all thought this was a different team this year. I mean, they were number one in the power play, number one in the penalty kill. I mean, they were defense first. Defense wins championships. They were coming back after last year's loss in Game 7 in the Western Conference Final against a Stanley Cup winning team. We thought, hey, okay, this year they're going to be able to get over the hump and finally do it. And then they started that like they did in in Anaheim, and losing games 1 and 2. And then they come back and win 3 straight, and we're like, okay, this is it. They have a chance to end it, Game 6. And of course, we see what's the trend now is they lose Game 6 and they go in Game 7. And like Murray said, they come out and they weren't playing to win. They were playing not to lose. They get behind early and they can't come back. I mean, they had a couple really good chances to hit the crossbar. I mean, the rebounds Rene was giving out were pretty bad, but one just didn't go in the net and it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, Game 7, the first period, it was unfortunate. They got down 2-0, like we talked about, that they'd get behind in these games every time in Game 7s, and it happened again. They turned it around the second and third period. The Ducks played much better and really attacked, Rene. They didn't get all the rebounds that they needed to get to, but they played a lot better. I really thought that they were going to tie up this game in the third period, especially after Kessler's goal, making it 2-1. There was a lot of pileups in front of Rene in that third period, and really thought they were going to at least tie it and go to overtime, Eddie. But it wasn't the same type Game 7 that we've seen where against the Kings and the Hawks when they got blown out. It was a much more competitive one, but unfortunately, it just wasn't enough, and the Ducks got eliminated in 7 games again.
Yeah, and I think it was the finish to the game that wasn't like Game 7s of the past. In all of the at least the recent ones, they've gotten down 3-0 or by 3 goals within 34 minutes or so. And I saw that stat on Sportsnet when I was watching the game, and I mean that was one of our keys is you got to get out to a fast start and you got to score the first goal. And of course, again, they start off slow and they get down 2 goals. And I mean in every Game 7s they've gotten down and they've gotten down by more than 1 early and it's killed them in the end. I mean this time though they did fight back like you said, but they just couldn't catch a break. I think we all thought when Arvidsson missed that empty netter that maybe they're going to be able to take it all the way back down and score, but just extremely disappointing again.
Yeah, and I mean the record for the Ducks the last 4 years, you all know about it now, is 4 Game 6s have been lost, and now 4 Game 7s as well. So Boudreau going down, losing all those. He only won the 1 Game 6 against Dallas. So not a great record in these closeout games with Anaheim, and overall not a great record, including his time at Washington. And once the game concluded, Game 7 that is, obviously there was a lot of comments about fire Boudreau and expected all that. I remember I ended up turning off my phone pretty early after the game. I just didn't want to see all the comments. I mean, rightfully so, everybody's upset, but I just needed a break because for me, Eddie, and probably for you too, and I know a lot of other people, I just didn't really sleep well the night of Game 7, and since then I haven't. It's frustrating, I mean, obviously we don't play for the team, and we're not part of the coaching staff or anything like that, but it's frustrating to see this, 4 years in a row, and basically on Friday, not surprisingly, the news came out that Bruce Boudreau was fired, Eddie, and of course, all the comments fired up again, and it was a really crazy Friday morning with everybody going nuts talking about what happened. And what was your initial reaction? I really wasn't surprised. I figured this was going to happen. I didn't know when, obviously, but it wasn't really a big shock to me, Eddie.
Yeah, it was a weird one because I think we were all surprised that it actually happened. Not surprised that he was fired, but they actually finally, did it. And I was one that I think they would have benefited from keeping him in a way. I'm kind of going both ways on it. I mean, when Murray had his press conference and he said, they just weren't comfortable going into the playoffs next year with this team and with Boudreau coaching this team, and I completely, I completely understand his view on that and the owner's view on that. I mean, the players in the team, like he said, they were out there playing not to lose, and that is because of the records that Boudreau has had in Game Sevens. I mean, they were playing not to lose, so they didn't have to deal with that. And like you're not going to win. You're not going to win if you're playing not to lose. You got to play to win, and I think that was the big issue. And getting rid of Boudreaux, hopefully that atmosphere and that that play is gone. But it's disappointing. He's a great coach. He was a good guy, and it kind of sucks to see him go.
Yeah, I don't take joy in seeing anybody, lose their job. I mean, it was kind of expected. Like you, I kind of have mixed reactions. I mean, I understand where Murray's going with this. I mean, if you go into the playoffs and you have eight, closeout games where you're up 3-2 in a series and you lose all of those, and the only game you do win, against Dallas, you were losing 4-1 and barely came back and won that one in overtime. I mean, there's kind of a pattern there. It's unfortunate though because you look at his regular season record. I mean, 208 wins, 104 losses, and 40 ties. He did or overtime losses. He did really well in the regular season. Four division champs in a row, which I know that's not the big banner we want, but I mean it's still something to be said for that. The Ducks did extremely well in the regular season the last 4 years, winning the division. Boudreaux with twice as many wins as regulation losses. And it's just something to be said. I guess the biggest concern is the playoffs, and if you end up second or third and you can go deep in the playoffs, that's better than, coming out first and then losing. And I really think the big issue this year, Eddie, was the expectation that once the Ducks turned things around, we expected the Ducks at least to probably go to the Western Conference Final, if not the Stanley Cup Final. So I think the first round exit is a huge reason why Murray made the decision he did.
Yeah, and that's that's exactly it. I mean, the first few years they were happy being a good regular season team. They kept advancing farther and farther in the playoffs, and so it was round one exit, round two exit, then last year with the Western Conference Final exit, and we thought they were trending upwards. And this year, like you said, the expectation was that we would get either back to the Western Conference Final or make it to the Stanley Cup Final, and then you lose in round one, and you lose in a fashion that you've lost in the last 4 years, and I think that has to be the reason why he's gone, and it's just disappointing. I mean, to have the season end so early with the high expectations and the acquisitions that Murray made. We thought this team was a lot better than last year. Their play, the way they fought back all season, and then just to die out like that in another Game 7 is just disappointing.
Yeah, and the good thing though, I think at least in Murray's press conference is one of the reporters, I don't know who it was, they asked about blame because obviously everybody's playing the blame game now, and a lot of people are pointing their fingers at Boudreaux, of course. But the other part of it is they got to look at Murray and the way that the players played. They all had issues too, so it wasn't just. Boudreaux himself, at least Murray said that, it's a team effort and there's a lot of other people that have to be looked at. And that's going to happen this weekend with all the player exit interviews.
Yeah, and it is on the players. I mean, they're the ones who have to go out there and get it done. Yes, there's a mentality, there's a philosophy that the coach puts in place, and that dictates their play. But the Perry going through the series with no goals. I mean, how do you expect to win a series when your leading goal scorer doesn't score you a goal? And when he's not scoring, the depth scoring has to be there. And in some games it was, and in some games it wasn't. I mean, Getzlaf was very good in this series. Kessler was very good in the series, and that's not to say Perry was terrible. But we expect him to score goals, and he didn't score goals, and all the blame doesn't go on him either. The defense at times was just awful. Games 1 and 2 were everybody's fault. Not just Boudreau's, the players as well, and to some point the goaltending at the same time. So it's on everybody, and they know that. And Murray, echoed that the other day, and I'm sure they'll be, dealing with it all offseason. And this firing, I mean, I guarantee at least the most of the leaders in this dressing room believe it. He lost his job because of them. So
Yeah, exactly. And we can basically go to the fan questions now because it covers all of this. Ian had asked us about whether or not Boudreau should stay or not, and he felt maybe he should be with the team, but he also asks, where do the problems lie? And I think it's a combination of things, Eddie, as we talked about. I mean, yeah, Boudreau could have stayed on the team, and maybe they could have given him another shot. But like Murray said in his press conference, he's not comfortable going into the playoffs, knowing what happened the last 4 years. So to me, the biggest problem really lies on the leaders of this team. And the leaders of this team are Getzlaf and Perry. And I don't like to play the blame game and all that stuff either. But if we're going to go around and talk about what's going on in Anaheim and how we're going to fix things and get this, playoff problems under control, I think they're the biggest two. I mean, you got to look at Getzlaf in his game sevens. He hasn't scored a goal in any game sevens, and Perry, you got to look at his playoff performance. You look at the last 4 seasons in the postseason. I mean, last season he did great. He had 10 goals in 16 games, but you look at the other three, he didn't do well at all. I mean, this series, no goals against Nashville. I'm sorry, no goals against Nashville this year, and then no goals against Detroit. Back when they first started making these runs in the playoffs 4 seasons ago, and then also against the Kings of Dallas, he only had a couple goals in those 2 series. So I think those are the two big guys that you got to talk to and look at, and it's unfortunate because a lot of people are looking at the Ducks now and looking at, and I hate to say it, but looking at how they choke in the playoffs in the big games. And a lot of it's on Perry and Getzlaf. And I know it's not just them. I mean, it's the whole team as well, of course. But they're the leaders of this team. One's the captain and one's the leading scorer. And it's unfortunate because if they don't get this turned around with a new coach, Eddie, no one's going to really remember that they won the cup in 2007 because they weren't the leaders back then.
hmm and it's just a nice big serving of karma from the San Jose Sharks because
Yep.
we made fun of them for so many years for choking in the playoffs and all the
Winning the
issues that they were
division.
having and winning the Western Conference and being first in the NHL for so many seasons and like you said winning the division and doing so well and then either losing in the first round or like the infamous going up 3-0 against Los Angeles and then losing the series. So and now they've got past that this year by beating LA in 5 games, and we've continued to choke in the playoffs, and now we're them. And it kind of sucks. It feels really bad. I mean, they have a right now to make fun of us for that, and we did it to them for so many years, but it's disappointing. And like you said, it does fall on the players, and it's an eerily similar situation right now with the coach being fired and the choking in the playoffs. And I mean, I don't think they should. But the path that San Jose took was to strip the captaincy off Joe Thornton and give him and Pavelski, and I believe at the time it was Marlowe, or I know it's Couture now, but to give them all A's. And the new coach figured out who he thought the captain would be. Obviously, now that's Pavelski, and they did that for 1 season. And maybe with the new coach, if he comes in and decides to do that, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I don't know if stripping Getzlaf of the captaincy is the right thing.
Yeah, and that was another fan question we had from another Eddie, obviously not you, but he asked about Perry and Getzlaf and the alternate captains and the captaincy and taking away the C from Getzlaf and obviously the comparisons of us to the San Jose Sharks now, and if that's the move, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think you take away the C from Getzlaf. I mean, he's still the captain, still leads his team. I wouldn't be surprised if they did try to do something like have 3 alternate captains or whatnot, but I don't really agree with that. I mean, like I said, I do put a lot of responsibility on Perry and Getzlaf because, like I said, they're the two $60 million men that lead this team. And they're the ones that have been on there, for pretty much the longest now. So they're going to have to do something to fix this next year. And I think a large part of it now is we have to figure out who the coach is going to be, Eddie, and that's what's really going to determine how this team is going to go forward next year, because this team is going to be different. It was going to be different anyways because of the salary cap, all the RFAs and UFAs. It was not going to be the same, but now it's really going to be different. I mean, with a different coaching staff, which we don't even know what the makeup is yet. Murray talked about it in his press conference that obviously today he's doing the player exit interviews today, Sunday, and Monday, I believe, maybe another day, but at least the next 2-3 days he's going to be doing that. He's going to focus on the players, and he's not happy with the players. And I'm going to tell you, those exit interviews with the players are not going to be a fun time for them, unfortunately, based upon Murray's press conference, in which he was very honest about how he felt about the leadership of this team, the coaching staff, the players in general, how they played, especially in games 1 and 2. He mentioned the beginning of game 7 as well. It's going to be interesting, and we're just going to have to find out the next coach that comes in and how it's going to go from there, Eddie. I mean, that's really going to be the next move to be made before we can figure out how this team's going to move forward.
Yeah, and he really did come in and he was honest and he said, this team's going to be different and that I mean, he said he wasn't going to take away the captaincy from Getzlaf. He said that would be stupid, but he left it open to a new coach being able to make his own decisions. So that puts some heat on Getzlaf right there. I mean, if a new coach comes in and says, I don't want you to be the captain, or we're going to do 3As, I'm going to give the captaincy to somebody else. I mean, Murray said he's open to letting a new coach do whatever he wants. The team obviously, like you said, is going to look different on the ice. I mean, we're going to lose a couple guys to UFA. We might sign some more. Might not be able to sign some of our RFAs. We all know the goalie situation, where one of them will probably be traded in the offseason around the draft. We're still waiting for that. But the bench behind the bench might be looking different too, because if one of the assistant coaches aren't hired as a head coach, a new head coach could come in and want his own bench staff. So that could be the end of Paul McLean and Trent Yanni behind the bench. And I mean, those two guys, they were the keys to leading us to the special teams this year. First power play, first in penalty kill. So I mean, seeing them go too, that's a possibility.
Yeah, it seems like Paul McLean and Trent Yanni would be the front runners internally if the Ducks do decide to go with one of them. If that's the direction that Murray and obviously the Samuelis feel. So I would say those are probably 1 and 2 options in the Ducks organization itself. Maybe a distant third would be Dallas Eakins, who is the coach, obviously, of the San Diego Gulls, who just moved on to the second round, which we'll talk about later in the show, which is great for them. So still have some hockey in San Diego to follow, even though the Ducks are out. So you have those 3 options. But what about outside the organization, Eddie? There were some other names mentioned, and what do you think about some of the other names that were out there?
Well, if you haven't checked it out yet, OC Register put out a pretty good list of possible coaches that the Ducks could have, or that Murray and his staff could have on his list for the next Ducks coach. And obviously McLean, Yanni, and Equins were the first 3 mentioned. But outside of the Ducks organization, there's a couple former coaches in here. Guy Boucher, who used to coach the Tampa Bay Lightning, he's been coaching in Europe for the past 3 seasons. Was fired from Swiss League team Bern last fall. He would be another option for the Ducks, possibly. I mean, also there's other teams out there looking for coaches too. You got to remember that. Minnesota might be looking for a coach if they decide to not keep Torchetti around. Ottawa has already fired Dave Cameron, and they seem to be the front runners for Boudreau right now. So Guy Boucher could be one of the options for them. There's also Mark Crawford, who has been coaching in the Swiss League as well. He just coached the ZSC Lions this year, which is the team that Austin Matthews, the projected number 1 pick, plays for. And he won the cup as a coach of the Avalanche in 95-96, and he's won more than 500 games as an NHL coach. So if you're looking for experience, I think he would be the way to go. I mean, there's also Randy Carlyle, which I don't know how you feel about that. I don't think I want to bring him back, but the last coach, the Toronto Maple Leafs, obviously coached the Ducks to their Stanley Cup championship in 2007, was replaced by Boudreau, so it'd be kind of ironic to have Boudreau replaced by him. I mean, I don't think I'd want that to happen, but he is a possibility. He is still out there. I mean, there is Doug Wilson, who coached the Ducks way back and was also a coach of the Leafs, who is out there still. And then there's the odd one that I actually had to look up because I wasn't too sure. But there's Travis Green, who's currently coaching the Utica Comets of the AHL. This would be a different sort of route if you weren't looking for experience, but you're looking for an up and coming coach in the league. You might be able to poach Travis Green away from the Utica Comets, unless the Vancouver Canucks decide to appoint him as head coach instead of Willie Desjardins. But that's a possibility too. And then the last one and the weirdest one that I don't know how a lot of Duck fans would feel about is Daryl Sutter, as his contract with the Kings is up at the end of this season, and neither him or GM Dean Lombardi have actually spoken out to the public about him re-signing with the Kings. So there is a possibility he hops over behind the bench in Anaheim. I mean, it would be it'd be an interesting story for me. I don't know. I mean, I would like it. He's won cups, but he's an interesting guy to say the least, and it would be weird to see him behind the bench in Anaheim.
Yeah, I think if Sutter was to come over, I think if you asked him and the media approached him and said, "Hey, what about coming over and coaching for the Ducks?" He'd probably say, "Great." I mean, that's really the response. I mean, Sutter's a man of very few words, and I mean, he's definitely got a unique personality. Um, and you may dislike him because he's the coach of the Kings, at least for now, and what he's done, and obviously playing against the Ducks. But I mean, if you want a guy with recent success, there's your guy. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it. I mean, the guy's won 2 cups. I mean, he's done really well in the Los Angeles Kings organization. So I'm not opposed to it. I mean, it may be kind of awkward at first, but I mean, we've gotten players on our team this year too that we didn't like, like Ryan Garbett. So I mean, there's things, stranger things have happened. So I think it comes down to one of two things, though, for this decision, which we don't know exactly when it's going to be made. But I really think it comes down to Murray and the owners deciding whether or not they want to stay internal or external. Eddie, if they go internal, I would think McLean would be the first choice, because he's been there before. He's coached in this league. He knows what he's doing. I mean, like you said, he helped the special teams play this season, so he'd probably be the strongest candidate internally. If they decide not to do that and to go external and outside the organization, now I mean it's wide open. I mean all those names you mentioned, some I like more than others, but I mean they could really go with any of these. I mean it's wide open. So it's going to be an interesting time this summer. We thought this summer was, well, one, we didn't think it was going to come this soon for the Ducks, and two, we knew that there was going to be issues with the RFAs and UFAs and all that. But I mean, it's really going to be interesting, Eddie, for the next couple of weeks, which I guess is good for our podcast because we'll have plenty to talk about in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting. Like if they decide to bring in a coach before the draft and before they decide to sign, have to sign all the RFAs and UFAs. If Murray talks with the coach, decides what type of team that they want to ice, obviously the final decision is Murray's. But that could change the outlook of this team next year too. If they don't, they might not even play the same style next year, depending on who's coaching. It could be a completely, different makeup. I think we've seen the end of the line juggling days in Anaheim, which is kind of a welcoming thing to see in a way. I mean, it would be easier for us to predict what lines are going to be out for the next the next games. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be different in that way too. And if the coach has an impact on who we re-sign and who we go out to sign in free agency and what type of players we draft, that will be interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, we had a fan question about that too. Brad asked about the upcoming draft and whether or not the Ducks would trade up in the draft. And I think it's an interesting question, Eddie, if the Ducks would try to do that. I really think it depends on what they do with the RFAs and the UFAs. I mean, if you look at the list here for the RFAs, you've got Lindholm, Vatanen, Raquel, Anderson, and Perry. Are the big names there, and we know we've talked about this at length, and other people have as well. That Lindholm and Raquel are the big two that they want to keep. There's also word that Anderson, they may try to keep him as well. That's the recent news that I had heard. So we have those to look at, and then you have the UFAs, which there's a ton. Perron, McGinn, Horkoff, Stewart, Santorelli, Holzer, and Hudobin, which, Hudobin's most likely going to Europe, but you still got a group there to choose. So I really think it depends on how many of these guys Murray decides to bring back. obviously with the new coach too as well. And depending on that number, if we're able to bring back most of these RFAs, I really don't know if the Ducks would trade up in the draft and do that, Eddie. But if they can't sign some of these people for whatever reason, then stranger things have happened. It could happen.
Yeah, and we all know that Getzlaf and Perry and Kessler are getting older and the window's closing. And I think if you have the opportunity in this draft to get into the top three, and that would be a rare occurrence, but I mean, as it finishes now, if I know the draft lottery is today, and obviously we don't know how it's going to turn out, but if it turns out how if everything went according to plan, let's say Toronto would have number one pick, Edmonton number two, Vancouver number three. Now Toronto's not going to give up that number one pick. They're rebuilding. Vancouver, I mean, I doubt they give up the number three. They're in a rebuild as well. The interesting one is the Edmonton Oilers. Is the top three guys are going to be forwards. And right now the Ducks are this has updated as of yesterday, but with them going out in the first round, I think they'll have a little bit higher than a 25th pick. So it'll be somewhere either in the low teens or in the high 20s because we did win the division. Either way, you could possibly see in a situation where the Ducks maybe trade Freddie or Gibson maybe to the Edmonton Oilers, who are in desperate need of a goaltender. I know they have Cam Talbot, who's done great for them this year, but I mean, if you can get into that top two or three and draft one of those Finnish players, I mean Patrick Laine or Jesse Puljujarvi, I think you do it if you're already set on moving one of your goaltenders. But it's a tricky situation, and it's tough to say if any of those teams would even move those picks.
Yeah, and that's another fan question that Alexander asked about was, if the Ducks are going to part ways with Anderson and then keep Gibson. And that's kind of what we thought would be the way that it would go. But the latest word I heard is that it may go the other way. The Ducks may keep Anderson and try to trade Gibson. There's it's kind of going back and forth. So obviously nothing's concrete, nothing's set in stone. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's Anderson or Gibson that's traded, not just one. A lot of us thought maybe it would be Anderson. So, keep your eyes and ears open for that. And like you said, trying to trade in the division, it's going to be difficult. I mean, if you try to trade Edmonton or Vancouver, and even Calgary with Hiller going out of the league too now, Calgary's going to maybe look for a goaltender as well. I mean, we don't know for sure, but that could be a possibility. But I would hate to trade Anderson or Gibson to one of our division rivals. That would just be terrible. So if something happens, Eddie, and it doesn't come in the draft, I really think if the Ducks move one of the goaltenders, I would hope that they would move them to the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and it's just the issue right now is goaltender depth in the NHL is actually at a decently strong point right now, where a lot of teams have a number one guy or a guy who's about to become a number one in their system, and they're either not looking to win now, so they don't need a guy like Freddie, or they like I said, they've already got an established goalie, and of course the only teams who seem to not have an established goalie right now is Calgary and arguably Edmonton as well. And of course they're in our own division, and you don't want to trade away a number one guy. But you're getting to that point now with the expansion draft pretty much a guaranteed thing happening next year. The NHL and the NHLPA agreed on all the terms the other day. So this is going to happen, and you got to move one of them now before you lose them for nothing. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, and if they decide to go for youth. This team's going to look younger no matter what next year. I mean, we'll probably see a little bit more of Richie. Theodore should be up with the team. We might get a chance to see Brandon Montour, depending on how things work out with Sammy Vatanen. And then Nick Cardilli's maybe not in. Wagner will obviously be up too. Stefan Nason. There's a lot of guys we'll see more of next year, and it'll be interesting to see how they work that out.
Yeah, I think a big question goes to the Ducks defense. And, we've seen this question out there too about maybe Fowler getting moved as well. That's something that's been mentioned in seasons past. And I think the Ducks are really big, and Murray obviously is big on keeping Lindholm. And after that, it's going to really fall upon Vatanen and what they do there, because the word is Vatanen wants a longer-term contract. But, as we talked about, Murray's not as fond of these long-term deals now with what's gone on recently. So I think there's a real possibility that the Ducks, if they can't come to terms with Vatanen, maybe he gets moved. Fowler, I don't know. I mean, he's a great skater. Obviously, he's not as much of an offensive, scorer as some people would like him to be. So, would he get traded? I don't know. That's a tough one. But I think the Ducks are really going to look at Lindholm and Vatanen first on the defense, and then, like you said, the Ducks have plenty of players to bring up. So, if something doesn't work out, or if they need to trade some of the blue liners they currently have, you've got Theodore and Montour that could come up and fill those holes.
Yeah, and really, I think the only guys who are guaranteed to be on this team next year are Lindholm, Manson, and Theodore. I think those are the three guys you have to have back next year. And then, there's been discussion for not just this season, but a couple seasons of moving Fowler possibly. Buffalo's always been really interested in him. Now with Vatanen being an RFA and you have a guy like Montour in the system as well who might be able to play a similar role to what Theodore did this year, and solidify a spot on the roster. And he plays a similar style of game to Sammy Vatanen. So maybe you give him a chance, but it's tough. I mean, with the window closing now, and it's tough to get this blue line to be even younger than it is now next season. And that'll be tough to try and get back into the playoffs and make it all the way to the finals. So, I mean, BX that we would all think would be back. But you never know. I mean, Murray said this team's going to look different. It just all depends on how different it's going to look.
Yeah, and another question too on the blue line is Dupree. Unfortunately, he did not play well in the playoffs. There was a lot of times out there where he got caught in different situations that resulted in goals. And I mean, I'm not just singling him out, but I mean, he was one that was out there for a few of them. And unfortunately for him, if you watch the way he played, even coming back from his concussion, he just hasn't been the same. And you can't fault the guy. I mean, when you get a concussion, it's a serious issue. And some of you heard about me talk on this issue with Andy on his podcast show. It's a big concern. But if you notice, when he first came over from Pittsburgh, he was extremely aggressive. And now when you watch, he's somewhat tentative. And I mean, I don't fault him for it, but the concussions definitely affected his play, Eddie. And it's unfortunate. He may be another one that the Ducks might consider moving when, he came over and he looked like a perfect fit. And unfortunately, the, concussion issue has been problematic for him this season.
Yeah, and he's an interesting one. I think we all liked his play when we first got him, and I mean, I think the Ducks still won that trade. Don't get me wrong, but like you said, he hasn't been the same since the concussions and everything like that. So I mean, it'll be interesting to see where his place is next year. I would think he would still be on the Ducks, but you never know. And we'll have to see how it gets made up next year. Like I said, I think the only guaranteed spots right now are for Lindholm, Manson, and Theodore.
Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking about the players too, the exit interviews are going on today. Some other news that we found out recently, it was on a Swedish news site, is that Lindholm had a rib injury that he sustained in Game 4 against Nashville. So he's most likely not going to participate in the International Ice Hockey Federation World Championship next week. He's probably not going to play in that. Perry said he is going to play in that. So that's one update, and I'm sure more injury updates will come out over the next few days. Not making excuses for any of the players, certainly not, but you know how it is in this league. When you play 82 games and then you go into the playoffs, it's brutal. So there may be more injury news coming out in this next week, Eddie.
Yeah, and I mean we had it last year too with or a couple. I mean it was a couple seasons ago with Getzlaf and his sports hernia and everything like that. And every year after the playoffs, players have been playing banged up, and then all the injuries come out at the end when they've been knocked out or when they've won the cup, and you see it with every team. I mean it happens all the time. There's a guy playing 80% the whole playoffs, or I think with the Florida Panthers, they said, I don't remember who it was, but somebody was playing 80% like the whole year. And Minnesota Wild had like 3 injuries on their blue line that they announced after they were eliminated. So it happens. I mean, they'll be okay, and we'll have to, we'll have to see how some of these guys are ready for next season. But it's not a long-term injury, so everybody should be okay.
Some other news too. Ryan Kessler was named as a Selke Trophy finalist. This is his 4th time. 3 times he was a finalist in Vancouver, winning it once. What are your thoughts on that, Eddie? He's got some stiff competition with Bergeron and Kopitar.
About time he gets recognized for that. I was about to ride if he didn't get a nomination this year. I mean, the guy's been unbelievable defensively, and I mean he's been a decent offensive contributor in the season, and in the playoffs he was great. I mean he scored I believe 4 goals for us, and he was just dominant in the playoffs. So, I mean he deserves it. It's the role that he plays. He's one of the best in the league, and obviously this shows it with his nomination. And he's up against, like you said, some stiff competition. Bergeron, who's won it before. Kopitar, again, these are some of the best defensive centers in the league, and I believe Bergeron and Kopitar had more points than him, but I think Kessler led the league in forwards and block shots, or he was close to it, and obviously his prowess in face-offs is going to help him there. But it's going to be tough for him to win, but in the end, I mean, I hope he does it. That'd be great for him.
Yeah, I mean, some of the numbers you look at for Kessler, I mean, he led all players in defensive zone faceoff wins, 441, shorthanded faceoff wins, 168, faceoff percentage, 58.5. I mean, he's just a beast in the faceoff circle and defensively, as you said, and he contributed too for the Ducks. I mean, he's the only one that scored in Game 7, and he really put it on this whole playoffs. So he has a decent chance. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what they vote come the awards. They'll be in Vegas in a couple months from now. But I'm glad to see him at least get that. He certainly deserves it. And even some people have said this, that they think that Kessler deserves to be captain. So, that's been out there. I'm not really going to go there. I mean, I still think Getzlaf is going to keep the C. But if for some reason that doesn't happen, and Getzlaf doesn't have the C next year, I mean, I would not be opposed to Kessler being the new captain.
No, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I like we were talking about earlier. I don't think a new coach comes in and just gives the C to another guy. I think if you're gonna do the most drastic thing that would happen is rolling with 3 assistant captains for a season, so the coach can make his decision on who he thinks the captain should be. I think that's the road they would go if that is what's going to happen. And it's possible. I mean, a coach could come in and say, you know what, I want to decide who my captain's going to be. Something's been going wrong in the last few seasons here, and if he thinks it falls on the leaders of this team, very well. I mean, have 3 assistant captains, and if by the end of the next season you don't think Ryan Getzlaf is your guy, there's nothing we can do. I mean, if he wants Ryan Kessler to be captain, if he wants Ryan Garber to be captain, there's nothing we can do to oppose it. And I mean, if that's the guy that he wants and he thinks is going to be the best to lead this team, then so be it.
I think the reoccurring theme of this show and really the summer is it's going to be interesting times, Eddie, in Anaheim for sure. Just from top to bottom, what's going to happen with the coaching staff and the offense, the defense, the goalie situation. There's just so much up in air with this team in the summer, and it's unfortunate because we really didn't expect the Ducks to go out in the first round. We really thought they would come through and at least make it to the second round, if not the Western Conference Final. So that's just the reoccurring theme. Interesting times. I mean, I have no other way to explain it. It's unfortunate. It's not what we wanted to happen. I'm sad to see Boudreau go. Whether or not it's the right decision, time's going to tell. We have to see who's going to come in and how the team's going to be next year. It's probably a move that they had to make based upon all the playoff failures and shortcomings. But now Murray's going to turn his fire towards the players, and it'll be interesting to see what happens from here on out, Eddie, because it's going to be a big shakeup in Anaheim.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's good for us. We're gonna have a lot of things to talk about. I mean, last year we had the Kessler trade to talk about in the off season, and then it pretty much died down. When I remember that is we had a lot of podcasts that were 25, 30 minutes long because we were kind of scraping stuff together. So at least this year we'll have probably 3 or 4 trades. I mean, obviously the draft, the new coach, RFAs, UFAs, you name it. We'll have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about, and it'll be a different team come October next year.
Yeah, and if you're still starving for hockey, there's a team in San Diego that's rolling right now. The Gulls, they took out the Texas Stars, and they've moved on to the second round of the Calder Cup playoffs, and they're going against the Ontario Reign. the Kings AHL affiliate, and that's going to happen on May 5th. So that's going to be a series that'll be fun to follow. As you know, Theodore Wagner got sent back down to the goals, and they're playing in with the team as well. And they've been doing well, Eddie. They took out Texas in 4 games, and now they're going to take on, the Reign. So at least we got some hockey still going in SoCal.
Yeah, and it'll be cool to see how far they can go. I mean, if they make it all the way to the finals or win it, that might be a nice bid in Eakin's favor to get the coaching job in Anaheim.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that would definitely give them a stronger case, for sure. Like we said, if they stick with an internal move as opposed to going outside the organization. But there'll be that to follow, and we're going to have updates on that as well. I know Thomas is one of our best writers as far as covering the prospects and the goals. So he's got a whole bunch of articles he's already told me he's going to be working on for the summer. So we're going to have that going, and we'll cover the games as best as we can. I know they're not on regular TV, but they're on the internet and the radio. So look for us to cover the goals as well. And if you're interested in joining and writing for the Ducks, we're still taking more people. Summertime, we still do the blog and whatnot. You can drop us an email at info@DucksNPucks.com. And I already got a few more people last night, which is great. So we're going to keep on building, getting more people and branching out and doing that. And as well, if you want to sponsor our show, you just send us an email again at info@DucksNPucks.com too. There's plenty of room for that. We'll still, like we said, be doing our show. We thought we were going to be doing maybe every other week over the summer, Eddie, but I mean, the way this is going, we may still be doing every week.
Yeah, it could be the way. And one thing I think we all kind of forgot about with the Ducks being out is we do still have the bracket challenge, which is up, and right now there are 2 people tied for the lead. There is the guy leading right now is Third Cup for LA. He has 85 points. And there's somebody else tied with him with 85 points who has Dallas winning, and then there's a bunch of people tied for 3rd and 5th. So we still have 2 people leading right now. I'm completely out of it. I'm sure you're probably out of it already too. So
yeah, I had to double check, but I'm pretty sure I'm down there too. My East Coast bracket was destroyed with some of the games that went on over there, and I'm pretty much done. Obviously, I had the Ducks going all the way, as I'm sure many of you out there had too. So, oh well, but someone's going to win. It's not going to be you or me, but yeah, I'm still going to watch these other games. Pittsburgh and Washington's a pretty interesting series. Dallas and the Blues is a good one. The Sharks took out Nashville last night in convincing fashion. That's another fun one to watch. So still be checking out the other games as well. Still a hockey fan of the sport in general. So that's how our summer's going to probably wind up, is watching these other teams, unfortunately, in the playoffs, Eddie. But at least we're going to have plenty to talk about.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, we'll have a ton of stuff to cover. Maybe not for this next week coming up. I mean, there's the draft lottery, which is technically, I guess, Canada's version of the Stanley Cup this year with no teams in the playoffs. So they've all got a chance at the number 1 pick. So that's happening today. So if you guys want to check that out, I'm sure it's going to be on the NHL Network or something. Not sure what time it's at, but there's that. But yeah, the Ducks have a chance to move up a little bit. Obviously not to get the first overall pick, but maybe we'll get lucky in the draft lottery today and be able to move up a couple picks.
Yeah, keep your eye out on that. And like we said, we'll be back next week with more action. We'll see what develops in the next few days over the player interviews. And as always, let's go Ducks.